Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan. Thank you so much for all the good wishes. It's another dark day. I have terrible lighting and I'm still in recovery. So in this video, I'm just going to respond to some of the questions I've received from viewers over the past year. Sorry it's taken me so long to do this, but my resolution for next year is to make such videos more regularly. I do have a backlog of questions and comments to address, and a few of them deserve a whole video to themselves. So I've plenty to keep me busy, but keep them coming. Right, a man who is in Germany and self-describes as a transsexual, I'll call him Alex, sent me a very long and quite a detailed email. Given the content of that email, I decided I wasn't prepared to spend any time writing a personal reply because I didn't think there was anything I could say that would help him. While I find the story of what led him to want to transition when he was pushing 40 or so very believable and moving, and I can sympathize with what he's been through, there really isn't enough room in my heart to care that much. That is what being hated, abused, taunted and lied about by trans activists for 4 years has done to me. I can only really empathize and feel motivated to try to help those who are being directly hurt by gender ideology, and that includes people who want to detransition. Whereas what seems to be hurting Alex is his rejection by people, and that seems to be just about everyone he knows or meets. They consider him what he calls too turfy to be trans. In other words, he's a traitor to the gender nutters cause, while he's also excluded from radical feminist groups that he would like to support. So how should he find people? How to begin networking? I haven't got a clue because I don't live in Germany. If he was here in the UK, he'd easily find other trans-identifying men and women who share his views. The ones who stick their heads above the parapet on social media or through public speaking, writing, making videos, they get hate from all sides, but they also get quite a lot of respect from many on the right side. I don't see the point, personally, in spending time and energy hating on trans-identifying people, male or female, who are brave enough to publicly criticize gender ideology, oppose the transitioning of children, oppose gender self-ID, etc. I don't consider them to be the enemy. In fact, I know a few like that, and I think of them as friends. And I can think of several who have shifted their position from what they believed at the time they medically transitioned. Even trans people can hit peak trans. As for radical feminism, well, I don't claim to be an authority on it, but I do know that any radical feminist group will exclude males, so there's no point in any man trying to gain admittance. On Facebook and maybe other social media platforms, there are groups that welcome gender critical people of both sexes. So maybe if Alex tried to find one of those, he would join and find more helpful responses. Good luck. R. Platt, who I believe is also a trans-identifying man, asked me if I think there is another treatment for gender dysphoria. I presume by that he means other than taking cross-sex hormones, having surgery to change your appearance, change your name, so-called cross-dressing, and generally demanding to be accepted as the other sex, as a member of the other sex. I can't answer that because I'm not a mental health professional. I do know that the weight of evidence shows that most children and adolescents who appear to be distressed about their sex and wish they were the other one grow out of it. For that reason, I am opposed to giving children and teenagers puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones and surgery. Once they are fully adult, they can do what they like. My opposition is to the ideology that holds that because someone calls themselves a trans woman or a trans man, they are entitled to be treated as the other sex in all circumstances. A couple of questions from Addison Beverly. Or is it Beverly Addison? That sounds more likely, so I will go with that, but correct me if I'm wrong. You asked me how I feel about transsexuals like Blair White and Rose of Dawn entering women's spaces. You draw a distinction between the likes of them and other trans-identifying people. You point out that while they call themselves biological males, they refer to themselves as women because they see woman as a social class. Yes, they do. That is part of gender ideology, and I really need to do a video just on that specific point. What does it mean to live as a woman? Exactly. Doesn't matter what they call themselves or whether they pass or whether they are honest about what they are in reality. They shouldn't be in our spaces. I have said in a previous video that there are times when it happens and we don't notice, or we may notice, but there's nothing we can do about it. Depends on the location. But with more and more reports emerging of women and girls being violated by men and boys in what should be female-only spaces, it is really important to stick to the principle that we need single-sex spaces, that men should learn to be accepting and tolerant of non-conforming men and their fetishes and mental illnesses. Living as a woman means nothing. It's his fantasy. Living as a woman means living with a female body and everything that brings with it. The older we get, the less it means to live as a woman, but it will always mean something different from having a male body. Women will not get prostate cancer, but we may get other cancers that men will not get. But beyond these health issues, we just live as human beings, don't we? We make our own choices about how we live our lives within financial constraints, of course. We may keep to traditional sex roles or not, as we choose. Obviously, I'm talking about those of us living in liberal democracies and Western cultures, and not in Afghanistan or places like the Yemen. I'll revisit the topic of sex and gender and address other interesting points you make about language in future videos. For now, another question you ask is, how would I answer the claim made by trans activists that trans-identifying men do not perpetuate stereotypes of femininity more or worse than women? I agree with the claim. Obviously, some of them look worse simply because they are men. They don't all look like Blair White. I don't think that those trans-identifying men like Blair White, who adopt an extremely feminized appearance, are doing more to perpetuate the ultra-feminine stereotype than some women are already doing. But I don't think that is the problem. People, whether male or female, should be able to wear whatever they want. Now, many young women of the 21st century and a few older ones are choosing to dress in a way that seems more highly sexualized and self-objectifying than ever before, but it's up to them. The issue for me is that so many trans-identifying men seem to see being a woman as all about appearance. So often we see them making comments about how trans women are prettier and hotter and we're jealous. Of course, many of these comments made on Twitter are greeted with sarcasm and pictures of trans-identifying men who are, let's say, less than pretty, but I don't need to go there. Caitlyn Jenner famously once said the hardest part of being a woman is figuring out what to wear. What he means, of course, is that is the hardest part for a man performing a notion of womanhood that is based on regressive ideas about how women are supposed to look. Quite a few negative comments about my looks and age are left below my videos by trans-identifying men or perhaps their male allies, which is great because they confirm what I say about gender ideology being rooted in misogyny. Those who promote it are sexist and ageist, the ageism being part of the sexism. Women's value still lies primarily in their youth and beauty. I wasn't going to respond to any of the trolls' comments in this video. I've got a folder full that I'll use in other videos. But since the last video I did on Samantha Lux, a man calling himself Bridget C, who is triggered enough by my refusal to go along with their lies in my videos to have left several angry comments over the past few months. In the past few days, he's left a few that illustrate the point rather well. This one is the shortest and probably the most literate, which may surprise you. For context, he said that calling Samantha Lux a man is a slur, and I said it wasn't, it's just a simple truth and therefore doesn't meet the definition of a slur. Truths. There are tons of truths that when stated are just being mean. In other words, don't tell the truth because it hurts my man feels and it's mean. Well, I tell you what, Bridget, I think mediocre sportsmen crushing the dreams of young sportswomen by claiming to be women themselves and entering female events is mean, and I'm not going to stop complaining about it. Then we get this, you're old. My old what? Okay, you mean you are old. I suspect Bridget is dyslexic or has some kind of learning difficulty, so I shouldn't wind him up about his spelling and grammar because he won't get it anyway. Yes, getting old is what everyone does if they are lucky, Bridget, and it's okay. It's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. I am 65 years old and I consider myself very lucky indeed. I have lost people who were a lot younger than I am when they died, and if I lived in a poor country, a country ravaged by war, famine and disease, I probably wouldn't have made it this far. But you keep crying about misgendering. Not very pretty. I beg to differ. I'm absolutely gorgeous, and the only person whose opinion on my looks actually matters to me agrees. Well, he has to, because his life wouldn't be worth living otherwise. Talk funny, appear out of shape, have a funny haircut. I mean, part of being a member of society is to not make a channel solely about you and say all those things. You'd still be a member of society if you made a channel solely about me and said all those things, Bridget, but why would you want to? You don't seem to be getting that my purpose with this channel is to challenge the ideology that you are enthralled to and show how it is hurting people and what rubbish arguments are made by gender cultists. So thanks for your help. If you want to make videos all about me, feel free. This platform is big enough for both of us and I'd feel so special. Some may be biologically fact, but it lacks manners, and so does calling trans women men. You're a bully, says the man who has left multiple comments slagging me off and not once engaged with any of the arguments I've made against genderism. Go figure. Right, back to Beverly, who continues. They go on to argue that even if they do, meaning even if they do perpetuate feminine stereotypes more than women, quotes, does that really mean we shouldn't treat them as the women they are? Does treating them according to their gender identity do more harm than denying them? Obviously, they're not women and they shouldn't be claiming they are. Going along with the pretense that men can be women does more harm to us because it erases us as a sex class with specific needs that are different from those of men. They may argue that an individual man who passes as a woman, lives a quiet life, uses ladies' public toilets and changing rooms without causing any problems to anyone else, shouldn't be a cause for concern. But it's not about individuals. By now, we all know of men who claim to be women and who don't live like that and who do cause problems. We need to resist the idea that womanhood is reducible to a feeling, to a performance, to some metaphysical essence, and that therefore we should accept any man as a woman if he says he's one. We need to resist that idea for our own safety, mental and emotional well-being, not to mention preserving women's sports and opportunities in certain occupations. This reminds me of an exchange I saw on Twitter recently where someone said something like, If a boy transitions in his teens and lives the next 50 years of his life presenting outwardly as a nice, gentle, law-abiding woman, why wouldn't you accept him as a woman? Well, quite possibly people around him will accept him as a woman. In his circle of family and friends, it doesn't matter, but the truth is that he is a man and you can't change sex, and the amount of time and energy that is put into fighting for the falsehood of gender identity would be better spent in challenging and breaking down gender stereotypes and for the rights of men to wear frocks. Talking of gender identity, Päivi Eerola wrote, recently I came across a trans activist who said, you clearly don't understand what it is to be transgender. It's not about changing your sex. It's about freely expressing your gender identity and having the right to do so legally and socially recognized. Trans rights are human rights. How would you respond to this? Well, the first thing I'd want to say to that trans activist, if they are a man, is that they don't understand what it is to be a woman, and if they are a woman, vice versa. Nobody knows what it's like to be something they are not, though obviously many people know what it's like to be unhappy with what they are, but being unhappy with what you are doesn't, of course, make you something else, except perhaps in your imagination. Gender identity refers to a subjective feeling. In a free society, you should have the right to express and act on your feelings as long as doing so doesn't hurt other people. When I was a child here in England, this was legal. This was the 1964 general elections. And so was this, taken in 1966. People had the right to express and act on racist feelings, and they had to legislate against this kind of shite because it hurt people. Gender, by which I mean socially constructed stereotypes of masculinity and femininity and everything that arises from that definition, such as gender identity, expression, roles, is harmful because it reinforces the notion that some behaviours, tastes, ways of thinking, ways of looking should be the prerogative of one sex rather than the other, and we should be striving to demolish that notion. There are masculine women and feminine men. So what? Of course, people should be free to express themselves however they choose, up to the point at which it hurts other people. As for this vacuous slogan, trans rights are human rights, if trans rights means men accessing women's spaces, sports, etc., which does hurt women and girls, well, no, they are not and never should be human rights. Okay, Jane Ford asks my opinion of drag acts. When I was young, there was a popular family entertainer called Danny LaRue, and I couldn't stand him for the sole reason that he got dressed up like that. Otherwise, I would have been indifferent. I looked for him on YouTube, and unfortunately, I found him. Here is 10 seconds worth.
I'm the girl with a little bit extra. I'm the girl with a little bit more. I've got a little bit here, a little bit there, and a very special little bit, but I'm not saying where.
As a teenager and young woman, I felt a visceral revulsion because it felt like mockery, like he was taking the piss. And yes, akin to blackface. Why did he dress up like that and sing songs like that one? It was a gimmick. I didn't see him as making fun of stereotype, which is a defense of drag queens I've heard from Magdalene Burns and others. I saw him as reinforcing it and being acutely aware of women's inferior status at that time and how we were judged on appearance at quite a vulnerable time in my life. It offended me. He wasn't pretending to be anything other than a man in woman face, and the emphasis again was all on appearance. That's how you do woman face, loads of hair, makeup, sequins. I don't mind male comedians playing female comic characters like Pantomime Dames and Dame Edna Etheridge and Lily Savage. I found those two pretty funny, just as I found Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders playing exaggerated, stereotypically macho male characters funny. I see them as different things. As for RuPaul and the highly sexualized nightclub drag queen performances, I see them as closer to Danny LaRue. I no longer feel exactly offended by them because I think I've just got used to them and become desensitized. Or maybe not actually, because rather than feeling offended, I often feel like throwing up. They are men with a fetish as far as I'm concerned, and I will defend anyone's right to look however they want, but I will defend my right to find it repellent. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.